Recently, a loyal subscriber reached out to me and gave me a reference to a tumbler, and it reminded me of something that I had made years ago, the stacked marshmallow s'more look. And I was like, yeah, I definitely want to remake that. But then another thing that prompted me to make today's tutorial is a cup that I found. So I actually found this at the Goodwill, and I was like, you know what? It's destiny. I want to remake this look and kind of combine the two together and see what I come out with, which is what led me to what we are making today. As always, I'll make sure to put everything I use today into the description box below so that way you guys can purchase those items if you'd like to. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. Jumping right into the base, that will be what our marshmallows will be. I wanted something, I didn't want it too glittery. You can add glitter, obviously, but I'm going to do mica powder. I'm going to do a white mica powder. This is a pearlescent mica powder. So again, wherever your imagination takes you with this, let it take you there. But I like the glossy shininess that it gives to it. It almost makes it look, I don't know, like a marshmallow. I don't know. Anyways, let's get that stirred up. So I'm just using this little, I think it's a 16-ounce handled tumbler that I purchased through Mother Tumbler. So my measurements for my epoxy is going to be a little bit more different than you guys. So I'm using 10 mLs of epoxy. That's what I'm applying over top of this. I just need a coating of it. Obviously, if you're using something bigger, you're going to need to use a little bit more epoxy. So I'm going to go ahead and get this simply applied. And after I get that applied, all I'm going to do is come through. You can either straighten out the look where you just, top to bottom. I'm just going to come through and kind of ruffle up my mica powders. It gives it a little bit of texture. It is noticeable. So, I mean, you can do this if you want to, or you can smooth it out, whichever way you want to do it. I'm going to go ahead and get it placed down onto my turner, and then I'm going to hit it up really good with my torch, just popping any of those little micro bubbles. And then I'm just going to simply let it sit and cure. So the coaster I'm going to be using is a pretty basic coaster. They all come in about the same. I think it's 4x4 is what they all come in. But about 2.5 ounces of epoxy. It does a pretty good job at filling it. So that's what I'm going to be using. I'm going to go ahead and get that stirred up. I wanted mine to have a graham cracker look. So I'm testing something out. I'm actually going to use sand. I had filler sand on hand. There's a lot of rhyming there. That was a little difficult at first. But I had this on hand. So I'm going to use it. If you don't have it on hand, you don't need to, okay? Just go ahead and use something else if you'd like to. But I'm going to go ahead and place my filler sand down into this. Now this is going to raise the epoxy level up. Obviously, I believe I raised it up until it hit the 3 mark. Now I got this jar of sand, if you can't just get it locally sourced, you know what I'm saying? I got this sand from Michael's, but they also sell bags of sand or, filler sand at Dollar Tree. So here I am signaling my hands there that I brought it up to the 3 mark, okay? So just so you guys know, I'm going to go ahead and get that stirred in. Then I was like, well, why don't I try putting some mica powder in it too? I don't really suggest that because what's going to happen is the sand is heavier than the mica solution, and it's actually going to separate once it's cured. So I don't really recommend doing this part like I'm doing here, but hey, that's what I'm here to do, is to figure stuff out for you guys. And if it don't work, I'm obviously going to let you know. But that's what happened. The sand sunk to the bottom and the mica floated to the top, and I'll show you guys here in a minute. But anyways, I'm just going to go ahead and get that simply placed down into my coaster mold. And I know a lot of you guys are going to ask, what is that gray thing around the coaster mold? What is that? Where can I get it? My husband made this for me. He 3D printed it. If you have a 3D printer, I can give you guys the dimensions, but it's my coaster holster. He made it for me years ago. Okay. We don't sell it. All right. It's just something he made for me, but it just makes it easier to transport and pick up, But if you have a 3D printer, just let me know and I'll give you the dimensions, all right? So I'm just going to go ahead and scrape out as much as I can out of my cup. We don't want to waste anything. Then after that, we are going to treat it kind of like a cake. We want to get all those little bubbles out of there, especially with using such a dense thing like sand. So I'm going to give it a few taps to make sure that all those bubbles rise to the top here. And this was just after, probably about 30 seconds after tapping it. You can already see a bunch of little bubbles starting to come to the surface here. And I'm going to take my torch and hit it up with my torch. This is what I've always done. I've never had an issue. I know some people are like, just spray it with alcohol. You can do that too. I hit it up with a torch. That's what I do. But I'm going to let it sit for another minute or two, and then I'm going to do the same thing where I come through and hit it up with my torch again, because more little bubbles will continue to rise. So just keep an eye on it for the next 30 minutes or so. And then of course you're going to set that off to the side on your flattest surface possible, which mine is where my turners are located, and let that cure. Now to make our snowman marshmallow stack. Yeah, there we go. Sure. So we're just going to go ahead and measure our surface, so that way we can evenly divide up our tumbler. Because mine's so small, I'm just going to do 2 stacks of marshmallows. But obviously if you have a taller tumbler, go ahead and stack 3 if you'd like, or 4 depending, because I know some of those 30-ounce skinnies are pretty tall. So now I'm going to go ahead and place that onto my turner, and I'm going to utilize that to help me make my line, making sure that obviously my tumbler is nice and straight on my turner. I'm just going to take a brown Posca marker, because we're going to be coming through and doing a chocolatey drip. So that way it won't be seen under the chocolatey drip once it's all said and done. Now for my handle, I'm just going to kind of rotate that in the opposite direction. So that way, or no, I'm going to stick my hand up under it. There we go. And then continue on with making my line. There we go. Now we have that division made up of where each marshmallow will be. Now this next part is completely optional as to if you want to even do it or not. I mean, that's really up to you guys. But I'm going to toast up my marshmallows because I like mine extra toasty. As you could tell from the beginning, it was a lot toastier than the other things that I did. But it's super simple to make it look toasty. We are just going to take a chip brush. You can use the chip brush. This is my one that I use for wood grains. I've used it for years. I think for the past 7 years, this is the same brush. I'm going to use my trusty old wood grain brush, and I'm just going to use teak wood or whatever brown you have on hand, and we're going to come through and kind of give this that burnt look. And I'm going to start right around the middle. And all I'm going to do is, without making it look like wood grain, because it could accidentally almost turn into that. You got to be careful. I'm just going to do like a dabbing motion. I was just trying to do just a little bit, like picking up just a little bit of inks on my brush and then just kind of dabbling in the center. Because once we have the drips down and everything, you won't really be able to see these harsh lines that we're making here. It will all kind of fade underneath everything. So just keep that in mind as well. But I'm also just going to come through and kind of do like that back and forth motion where I kind of just take the residual that's left on my brush, so almost like dry brushing, and scrubbing it back and forth, creating more of that brown look in the center. It's like I said, you just want to be very careful that you don't add too much at a time. But if you do accidentally add too much, it's okay to come through and take a bit of rubbing alcohol and just kind of wipe it away if you need to. That's completely fine. Who's going to know? Only you'll know. You know what I'm saying? So I'm going to come up and do it up around the rim. I'm going to do it around the handle. I'm going to do it around the bottom. That's exactly all I'm going to be doing. Now this was pretty good for me here. Like that looks good too. But I wanted to come through, and I kept going. So mine became a little bit more toasted than usual, but right there would have been perfectly fine as well if you didn't want it to go beyond what I'm going to be doing. All right, she's all toasted. You can set her off to the side if you want to for about an hour or so if you're worried that the tape that we're going to put around the middle might pull up some of your coloring, but it did fine for me. So I moved right into this next part, but I'm going to put a piece of painter's tape right above the line we made in the center, because we're going to go ahead and move into making our drip. So you guys are going to be like, what? But I'm going to put mine on the turner, and we are going to just simply use acrylic paint. This is the only thing I'm going to use for my drip. This is actually from the Dollar Tree. It is like the perfect consistency. As you can see here, I tested it out on my bottle there. It is the perfect consistency between thin and thick. It almost works like puffy paints. because it'll stay pretty much in place once you have it down. So that's all I'm going to be using is this brown acrylic paint that I purchased through the Dollar Tree. So you just want to make sure that you get your line as smooth as possible. So I get it to the tip of the nozzle, and then I'm just going to slowly press it out, making sure that it's right on that tape line and where the tumbler's at. So that way, once we go to make that drip, that I know it's going to be smooth once I pull the tape back. So just make sure it's a little bit on the tape and a little bit on the tumbler itself. Now to get in between the handle there, I have pipettes. I don't know if you guys have pipettes, but I think they sell those at the Dollar Tree now too. And I'm just going to come through and kind of thicken up some areas and make other areas thin, because I don't want this to be a deep drip. I just want this to be a little bit of just a very small amount of chocolatey drip. So I'm not adding too much. I'm doing a pretty thin layer of this. But as you can see, like right there, it's kind of built up and some areas are thinner. That's what we want. Then I'm going to come through just like with our puffy paint, be very careful, and on a flat surface, I'm just going to start lightly tapping it. I don't want to tap too hard at first because, like I said, I don't want a deep drip. So then I'm going to get more comfortable and I can tap a little bit harder if I want to, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. I just want it to look like that chocolate's, squeezing out in between the two marshmallows. That's all I'm going for. Now, again, I didn't want mine too glittery, so I didn't do this, but you could go ahead and sprinkle down your glitter right over top, so that way it has a glittery effect to it if you'd like to. Now I'm going to go ahead and move into removing my tape right away. I'm just trying to be very careful when I go under my handle, so trying not to rub the paints on anything, but it's okay, because you can just come through and wipe it off with your finger if you need to. But how easy was that drip? So now I'm not going to do the second drip yet. I'm actually going to place that back onto my turner, because I didn't want to set it upright, because this was the first time I ever did this, but I think it would have been fine sitting upright. I don't think it would have moved too much more, but just in case, I put it on the turner. Now I'm going to let this dry fully before I do my second drip, because I'm going to have to tap it again, and I don't want to move these drips around any more than they are right here. So I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. And while that's drying, because it took a few hours to get that crust over top, I'm going to go ahead and wash up my utensils that I used to create this, so that way it doesn't get all dried on me. Now you got to fight the temptation to touch the drips, but you'll know because it turns like to this matte brown finish versus the glossy finish that I had when we first applied it. So try your best not to touch it until it looks that matte color, okay? Now the face was super simple. I found it right off of Creative Fabrica. I went ahead and cut out, it's mainly just two colors. So the face portion, the outline portion is just going to be black. And then the nose, I went ahead and made like this textured gold color. But it's super simple. You just stack it right on top of each other, and there you go. You have a little face. Or there's so many other options out there as far as like snowman faces and probably even UVDTFs out there. So whatever way you feel you want to do it, go ahead and do it in that fashion. But I had the vinyl in hand, so that's what I'm doing. Now, for the face, we are just putting it right over top of everything we just did. I have not put any type of sealant over it. I haven't put any type of epoxy over it yet. We're doing this all in one swoop right over top of everything, okay? All right, now our face is applied. She's looking happy, but she needs some chocolate around the top too, so we're just going to do the same thing like we did around the center. But this time I'm going to put it onto a stick, just a popsicle stick or crafting stick there, and just do a thin line of it right across the top there. And all I'm going to do is, there we go, now that's a better view. I'm going to take it and I'm going to scrape it and then move it. So did you guys see what I did there? Let me show it one more time. I'm going to move my stick across the edge as I scrape off the paint. That's all I'm doing. And again, we're going to do kind of thinner and thicker layers of this paint, giving us that different drip look to it. Course, once we get done applying our paint, we're just going to go ahead and give it the few little taps we want. I'm just going to keep an eye on the face portion because I don't want anything really covering my face. Again, we're just going for a very low drip here. So just give it a few taps until you get it the consistency that you would like it. I like that. That's absolutely perfect. And again, we're going to do the same thing where we set it off to the side and let that dry. I'm going to go ahead and get my wand back into it. And I should have put my wand in before, but I didn't. I'm going to get my wand back into it. I'm going to place it onto my turner. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and set that off to the side and let it dry overnight, making sure that I know for sure that acrylic paint is completely dry. For the coaster, before I demold it, I'm going to go ahead and put on these little rubber bumper pieces. I like it. It gives it a nice sturdy feel to it when you have it sitting down on the table. So I'm going to come through with some UV resin. So I'm just going to put 4 little dots into each corner. It's pretty simple. And then I will come through and just place my little bumpers right down into my UV resin. I'll just go ahead and get them lined up to my best of my ability there, making sure that they're pretty much in the corners where I want them to be. And then go ahead and set that UV resin with a UV light. Now here's what I was talking about. You can see that the mica settled, or the sand settled, making the mica go to the bottom there. So it gives it a 2-layer look. Anyways, it's still usable, right? So I have these little chocolate pieces. Aren't these so cute? I don't know how to pronounce it, cabochons. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and pick out a few of these pieces, and the main thing you want to do is whatever you pick out to put on the inside of the coaster, you want to make sure you want to pick it up and look at it straight on and make sure nothing's going to be poking out of the top, at least where the tumbler is going to need to be placed. It's okay if that happens, as long as the pieces are out of the way to where the tumbler won't sit on it and it'll be crooked on the coaster. That's all you want to do. So now I'm going to take some more of that chocolate paint that we use, and I'm going to utilize that and place my pieces down onto it, almost looking like it kind of got melted, so you guys can do that if you want or not, you don't have to, completely up to you. So I'm just going to do that. I'm trying to get it moved around, but I just ended up using my stick. It works a little bit better. And then just place your pieces down until you like the way that looks. I knew I wanted some of mine to be coming up on the corners, so I'm going to add a little bit of paint, just like how we did on our tumbler itself, and kind of scraped it off to the side. And I'm going to add little pieces of chocolate onto the corners as well. Again, completely optional. And once you have that all loaded up, you're just going to set that off to the side to let it dry fully. Again, it'll turn like a matte, kind of darker brown color, so that way it's fully dry. But you definitely don't want to add your epoxy just yet, because you just don't want to do that. So let that dry. Here's my coaster. I'm going to show you guys. See how it looks half glossy, half matte. Not there yet. So we're going to push that off to the side still. Now, before I add a coating of epoxy over top of my tumbler, I am going to seal it. I'm going to use liquid sealer because it was raining pretty hard here when I was making this. So we were actually going through the middle of a hurricane as I was doing this. But anyways, I went ahead and sealed this up with some liquid sealer. I'm going to set that off to the side and let that dry. And then we're going to add a coating of epoxy over top before we add her little arms. And of course, I did want to make it a little sparkly, so I'm going to add a little sparkle to this part, all right? I'm going to add a little bit of sparkle to my epoxy. So I'll put down in the description what I used. So I'm going to go ahead and get that stirred up. I'm going to get that applied, get that onto my turner to cure, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. For her little arms, we're just going to be using air dry clay. It's super simple. I just got this from Michael's, but again, shout out to the Dollar Tree. I think they sell, a pound's worth of air dry clay there now. So I'm just going to take a little bit and I'm going to knead it up a little bit. I like just kind of squishing it around, making sure it kind of warms up and gets formed together. I also got this extruder and it comes with all these little tips. It's just going to make it a lot easier. If you don't have an extruder, you can just do the little snake method where you roll it back and forth until you get the look that we're going for. But I'm going to go ahead and use my extruder to do what we need to do next. So I'm just going to choose this one. It kind of looks like it's going to make spaghetti for me. It's going to make like multiple little strings for me. So I've seen these extruders around. Mine's manual, so I have to press it myself, but I've seen ones where it's like battery powered, which might be easier for some of you guys because it was a bit hard. So what I ended up doing was having to place it onto the table and press it down in this fashion because it is a little hard to get through the extruder. So, but it's still a lot simpler than having to hand roll these all individually and making sure they're the right size. So I got to give it that, I guess. So this gave me the perfect amount that I needed. I'm gonna need 3 of these per arm, so that way he has 3 little fingers. So I'm thinking of this as like it's like the fork that you toast the marshmallows with. That's kind of what I was envisioning. Or you could do sticks. I don't know, but I was going mainly for like a fork look, almost like the mug that I got from the Goodwill in a way. So using a clean surface, because if you do it on your table, you might get glitter and stuff into it, hair, I don't know. So just on a clean surface, I'm gonna line them up, and then I'm just going to gently start twisting them. I did probably about 2 inches worth of the twisting, and I'm gonna lay it down onto my tumbler to kind of visually see. I think that was good, yeah, I like that. And then I'm just kind of visually seeing where I want to place his arm as well, so that way we don't accidentally make it too short. That was down too low. I didn't like that. So I'm actually going to bring it up to about where the drip line's at. I think I did like right where the handle, like right where the handle's at. That's what I'm going to use as my guide. I'm going to do the same thing for the next arm, line up my little strings and give it a few little twists, probably about an inch or two worth of twisting, and then I'll place it down onto my tumbler to visually make sure that it looks even with the other arm. So I wanted her holding on to something, so I had a hard time choosing between the heart, which would have been cute, or this one that looks like it has a bite taken out of it, and that's what I ended up choosing, was the one with the bite taken out of. So now I'm just going to take some hot glue, and I'm going to get that attached to where I want that. So just right down the center, right where the nose is, I'm just going to use that as my visual guide to place my chocolate piece down. Now we're going to go ahead and take our arms, and we're not gluing it down or anything. We are just getting it placed because we want it to dry and place where we want it to be. So we're going to go ahead and line up her little fingers and get that how we want it. We're going to get it all lined up, press down, making sure it forms nicely. And right up at the tip of the arm there, I'm going to go ahead and cut it, make it a clean line up the back there. So just give it a little cut and pull that away. And then we're going to come through and cut her fingers as well, making them as long as we need them to be. Try not to cut them too short. I'd rather cut too long and then come back through and have to cut again versus the opposite, where I'd have to unravel the arms and make them a bit longer. So just make sure to make them a little bit longer if needed. Of course, come through and do the same thing with the other arm, making sure everything is right where you want it to be and getting those fingers cut the length that you would want them to, along with the back piece of the arm, making sure it has that nice solid look to it. And make any more little adjustments before it starts to dry, and that's how it will dry. So I'm going to place that to the side and let that dry fully. I'm just going to let it dry overnight. And I made the executive decision because I had a little bit of clay left over inside my extruder. I'm going to go ahead and put down this kind of bigger piece into it, so that way when I extruded it, it makes this bigger tube there, and I'm going to actually make some mini marshmallows out of this. So you just cut it to the size that you want your little mini marshmallows. And you're just going to give them a little roll and pat to make them formed into the little marshmallow shape that we know. And you're just going to let those dry along with your arms, and those will be great inside of our coaster. Our arms are nice and dry, and you want to be very gentle with them. They're little guys, okay? They might break easily. I'm just going to take some gray, and I'm going to give these a coating of paint. Obviously, you can paint these any color you'd like. You could maybe even use like a metallic acrylic marker and make them look more like forks if you want to, but I'm just going to use the gray and paint that on. And after that dries, we're going to go ahead and take our hot glue gun once more, and we're going to put a little hot glue down onto the underside of the arm, and we're going to get that relined up and placed down onto our tumbler. Again, just being very, very gentle. We're going to do that with the opposite arm as well, just applying a little bit of that hot glue and working as fast as we can so that way that glue doesn't dry on us. Get it all lined up. And all that's left to do for our little marshmallow guy is add its final coats of epoxy. And of course, when working with 3D elements, when you go to epoxy, you just want to be very careful. I just kind of do a little finger scoop at a time and make sure that everything is nicely around my 3D element without getting too piled up. That could happen if you accidentally add too much epoxy at a time. So just be mindful, making sure that you come through and smooth everything out as you go. But I ended up doing 2 coats of epoxy and just making sure that I hit it up really good with my torch and making sure that it's not too piled up around my arms. Again, I'm going to add a little bit of sparkle down into my epoxy. I'm going to go ahead and pour that down into the center of my coaster, making sure that it's up above those chocolate pieces that are in there. And I'm just going to tilt that around, making sure everything is nicely coated. Then I'm going to come through and take my finger and I'm going to take some of that epoxy. I'm either going to take it out of the center or I have a bunch more in my cup there that I'm going to use as well. But I'm going to use that and I'm going to coat the outside of my coaster. Now, if you do super thin layers, it's not going to go anywhere. If you do too much, obviously it might run down the side. It's up to you guys as to what you want to do. You could get that silicone that you can put on the bottom so that way it doesn't get molded up around the bottom. But I just like to do these little thin layers and it works just fine for me. So I'm just going to coat everything up in my epoxy very thinly. And again, I'm going to do this 2 times. So I didn't fill up that center all the way. And I'm going to come through and add one more layer over top of everything and coat everything up really good. So that way I know that it's going to last me. After I get the outside all coated up in my epoxy, I'm going to go ahead and get my marshmallows down into it. And I'm also going to add a little bit of dye inside of it, kind of giving more of that illusion that it's melted chocolate. So again, I'm just going to place my little marshmallows down in there, making sure that they're not going to be above my epoxy line once it's all said and done. So that way I know my tumbler is going to sit sturdy on the coaster. And then I'll come through and add just a drop of teak wood to whatever is left down in my cup. You just need the tiniest amount. You don't need very much at all. And then I'll just come through and just very lightly take my stick and just kind of swirl that around. Again, just giving it more of that illusion of melted chocolate. Again, you don't have to do this, or you can add more, add less, however you guys want to do. And of course, I will go place that onto the flattest surface I have, again, by my tumblers, let that cure, and she is ready to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.